Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Sorry I was away for a couple days. I would have started it on Thursday if I could, had some things going on. I'm completely fine, don't worry. Alright, today we're ranking the Bloons Tower Defense Tier 5s. Ranking them based on how I personally feel about them. Their design isn't too big of a factor, but I'll count it. And how good they are in boss events / chimps mode. Okay, let's start. Ultra Juggernaut. Now, Ultra Juggernaut is an interesting one. He isn't insane on chimps, and he's horrible in boss events, but I don't know. There's a couple of maps where he can really shine, but mostly Ultra Juggernaut really isn't very good. I gotta say. I don't really feel strongly about him. I gotta say. I don't hate him, I don't love him. He's pretty mid all around, in all honesty. So I'd say C tier is a fair ranking for Ultra Juggernaut. Not incredible, but not horrible either. Alright, Plasma Monkey Fan Club. This thing is powerful when set up correctly, but it takes so much time, effort, and money to set up correctly that you may as well just go with a stronger tier 5. Because on its own, this thing is horrible. Its design isn't insanely bad, but it's still not incredible. And yeah, with the amount of money it takes, like, you have to get 20 Super Monkey Fan Clubs, and they alone cost like $7,000 each on top of this thing. So you're looking at a good $200,000 for something that can barely defeat it can defeat the round 100 bad, but like that's about it. And you're definitely not getting 200k in a chimps run. You could get it in a boss event, but I might have to ask why. Because for that amount of money, you can get an MAD, and MAD completely shreds a boss. In fact, if you're not versing, like, Lich, you could also Ultra Boost it, which would make it even stronger. So, I don't know. It's not worth the cost. D tier. It's not F. It still has some uses, but it's pretty horrible. Alright, Crossbow Master. This thing has a sleek design. He's decently powerful in chimps, but boss events, it doesn't really do much. I gotta say, for the cost you're getting, it does some decent Moab and DDT damage in the late game. Late game being like rounds 80 to 100. However, it needs help with super ceramics. Chimps mode isn't exactly its best friend, but it doesn't do too badly. It definitely does better on straight lines, which a lot of maps have. So, I'd say B tier for Crossbow Master. Also, the fact that you can get 2 in one game is pretty good. Alright, Glaive Lord. Glaive Lord has a pretty cool design, pretty much the same as Crossbow Master. They both have good designs. And Glaive Lord's decently powerful, I suppose. He can certainly destroy pretty much any ceramic rush. And on maps with a specific spot to put him, like Resort and Balance, he completely destroys. However, on maps without those places where he can maximize the use of his rotating glaives, he really isn't that good, I must say. So, I think Glaive Lord goes with Crossbow Master in B tier. He's not horrible, but he's pretty good, I'd say. About as good as Crossbow Master. Perma Charge. This thing, I'm putting it straight in A tier. It's got a good design. Boss events, it can actually have some usage. I like to use it for tier 2 Dread Bloon, Rock Bloon cleanup, because it does pretty well against that. Specifically for the military one, while the MAD can't hit them. It's very annoying, those rock blooms. But anyways, Perma Charge in chimps is also nothing to be scoffed at either. It's not an incredible tower, but it still does pretty well, and can definitely provide some much needed popping power in the 80s and 90s. So yeah, A tier. Moab Domination. I gotta say, this thing suffers from the same thing that Ultra Juggernaut does. It just doesn't have enough uses for it to be an incredible pick in chimps or boss events. It does have a decent design, but boss events, why would you bother? Like, Perma Charge is right there, and he does more to bosses than Moab Domination ever will. And, like, I gotta say, in chimps, he's too expensive. Like, $54,000 is a lot to spend on a tier 5. And when you're not getting something as powerful as like an MAD or a Flying Fortress, it really isn't worth paying more than $40,000 for a tier 5. Like, most chimps runs, you're looking at strats to get you to round 100, and Moab Dom doesn't really fit into any strats. I gotta say, Moab Press is really good in chimps, but I'm looking specifically at Moab Dom, so he goes in C tier with Ultra Chug. Alright, Bloom Crush. This thing is, like, its design's decent, but I have never seen a single person use this thing in a boss event, or in chimps for that matter, because it's just not needed. It's perma-stunning of everything except for bads and bosses, can be useful in very niche scenarios. Like, say you're on Resort, which is like the easiest map in the game to chimps, and you have Glaive Lord down, and then you place Bloom Crush. It will help the Glaive Lord, but at the same time you could also get like an MAD for about the same cost that would also help the Glaive Lord. So, I don't know. It's going into D tier. It's a lot less powerful than Plasma Monkey Fan Club, but it's also a lot easier to get set up than Plasma Monkey Fan Club, so they balance out. Moab Eliminator. This thing can do some decent bad damage, but other than that, I have never seen a soul use this thing. That's about all I have to say for it. Alright, C tier with the other niche guys. Bomb Blitz? Recursive class, like, it's essentially the same as Moab Dom. Its 4th tier is really good in chimps, but its 5th tier doesn't see enough usage. Its passive ability is completely useless in chimps, and I'll never use it against Dread Bloons, so I don't know if it destroys the Rock Bloons with its passive ability, but yeah. Bomb Blitz goes in C tier. There's nothing super special about it. Alright, well, except for getting, like, billions and billions of pops in sandbox mode. Anyways, Inferno Ring. Inferno Ring's going straight to A tier, maybe pushing S. It doesn't really see much usage in boss events, but it has a pretty high price tag and hasn't got an incredible range, but you get this thing a primary expertise and it will pretty much beat the chimps game for you. If you're able to survive up until you get the Inferno Ring, then you're good until like round 95, and by that point you'd probably have a MIB, well, probably not an MIB, but like a primary expertise to back it up. Like, Inferno Ring has pretty good damage with its Fireball, and it's able to deal with Super Ceramics pretty well, it can deal with Moabs pretty well. The price tag is the main thing holding it back from S tier. If it was cheaper, then it would be an S tier. But yeah, Inferno Ring is incredibly powerful for a reasonable price tag, but that price tag is still pretty high. Super Maelstrom. This thing suffers from the exact same thing that Ultra Juggernaut does. It is super cheap, but isn't very useful at all. And while Ultra Juggernaut has some usage on some maps, Super Maelstrom doesn't really have any usage in chimps or boss events. So I gotta say, Super Maelstrom, you're going in C tier. He's not as bad as Bloom Crush and Fan Club, but Plasma Monkey Fan Club, but he's still not great. Tax Zone. If this was before his recent nerfs, Tax Zone would be in A or S tier. But currently, all Tax Zone can manage is a B tier, because his Pierce was nerfed recently, and his well, I don't know about his Pierce, but his damage was nerfed, so he doesn't do 2 damage with every attack. Instead, the attacks just get an extra damage to Moabs, which makes him horrible at cleaning up. His Moab damage is decent, But yeah, anything more than like 2 or 3 balloons and he gets overwhelmed very, very easily. Also, his loss of attack speed from the top path really doesn't help him. So, yeah, attack zones in B tier. Alright, next up we have Super Brittle. Now, Super Brittle is going in A tier for one reason and one reason alone. Its utility in boss events. Providing 4 extra damage per projectile to a boss balloon is incredibly helpful, especially in the later tiers. Obviously, 4 extra damage doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have super fast attacking towers like Attack Zone with a lot of projectiles, then it really helps. That's why a lot of people like to get Embrittlement for the first tiers of bosses, because it allows Attack Zone to just completely obliterate them. So, yeah, I would say that Super Brittle's an A tier just because of its ability to help combat bosses. Chimps mode, it doesn't really see much usage, but for the bosses alone, it's got to go in A tier. Absolute Zero. Icicle Impale. Okay, Absolute Zero is horrible, and I don't think anyone's going to contest that. Anyways, Icicle Impale. This thing is pretty similar to Crossbow Master in many ways. It can't deal with super ceramics well, but it's a decent DDT counter, and it can do decent Moab damage in the late game. So I think B tier with Crossbow Master is pretty fair. I'm flying through these. Alright, Bloon Solver. The Bloon Solver. With his recent buff, I gotta say Bloon Solver gets to A tier. Like, you can solo up to round 80 at the least with, like, a mentoring. And like, Bloon Solver. Because his puzzles are so good at dealing with ceramic rushes. That's what he does, and he does it incredibly. So, yeah. Actually, he is pretty good, but I am overhyping him a little bit. He doesn't quite make it to A, but he is still B tier. He's still pretty good. Gluestorm. Now, if bosses weren't a thing, like, Gluestorm is in the same situation that Super Brittle is, in that it's very useful against bosses, providing extra damage from all towers, instead of just a small range like the Super Brittle, but it sucks in chimps. Like, I gotta say, I have never seen a soul use this thing in chimps that wasn't a specific challenge. So, I gotta say, it's definitely not as good as Super Brittle, but it still deserves B tier. Super Glue. This thing suffers like all the other things in C tier. Like, it's pretty cool, don't get me wrong. Having that perma stun is very helpful, especially against DDTs. However, if you're looking for DDT coverage, Icicle Impale works just as well, if not better, for similar to slightly lower cost. So, yeah, I gotta say, Super Glue, 1 in C tier. Alright, and that's the tier list so far. Next video, I'll be ranking the military monkeys.